My name is Thomas Flores. I'm the Director of Graduate Programs and an Associate Professor here at the Carter School. And I'm really, really excited today to be able to be a convener for this conversation with three people at the Carter School, three valued colleagues who have done so much to help us to think about questions of justice and peace in the United States. And so what I'll do today is I will introduce Ajanet, Tehama, and Ajanet, Tehama, and Christie. And then I have a few sort of leading questions for them to kind of jumpstart conversation amongst the three of them. And then I'll do some moderating there. And then once we have maybe sort of 15 or 20 minutes left, hopefully we'll have the time to be able to have some Q&A from our indefatigable audience who has waited so long for this event to actually begin. So let me start. I was interrupted when I was introducing her before, so I'll start with her this time. Let me introduce my colleague and friend, Tehama Lopez Bunyasi. Tehama is an assistant professor here at the Carter School. Her book, Stay Woke, A People's Guide to Making All Black Lives Matter, was published last year by New York University Press. She's the co-author of, with Candace Watt-Smith, of a really just fantastic, I think, introduction and primer using a wealth of evidence about the current movement for Black lives, and is really just an amazing sort of live textbook of understanding questions of structural racism in the United States and movements to alleviate it. Her second book, which I believe is tentatively titled Breaking the Racial Contract, is under contract, also with New York University Press. Next, I'd like to introduce Ajanet Rountree. Ajanet is a second-year doctoral student here at the Carter School, and she holds a master's degree with honors from the University of Alabama at Birmingham in anthropology of peace and human rights. Her work is focused in on understanding narratives of women's lives, especially Black women, and she uses the tools of anthropology to understand questions of human rights, justice, and peace. Finally, Christie Jones. Christie wears many, many hats at the Carter School, and today she's wearing her doctoral student and scholar hat. She is a scholar of anti-racism, and as a doctoral candidate is focusing her research on narratives resistance and resilience against racialized dehumanization. Her dissertation investigates how Black Americans can imagine peace while living the realities of anti-Blackness. Christie has earned a master's degree in peace operations from George Mason University at the Schar School, and she also holds a BA from Bennett College, a historically Black all-women's college in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so thanks to all three of you for being here and for your patience to make this panel work on a Friday morning at 9 in the morning. And so the reason why we wanted to have this panel today was to think about the relationship between what we perceive as structural violence in the United States and the mission of the field of conflict analysis and resolution and of the Carter School as an instrument of that field. We know for a while that the field of conflict resolution has sent Americans around the world to help other societies seek peace. And if you just browse the Carter School webpage, you'll find evidence of us having gone to, at the very, very least, Colombia, Indonesia, Eritrea, the Caucasus, South Sudan, and beyond. But at the same time, scholars of critical race scholars have very carefully, painstakingly mapped how structural racism permeates American society. And that arguably calls into question the moral authority of American conflict resolvers' attempts to build peace abroad. And in doing so, we may think of a figure like Woodrow Wilson, who is known internationally as someone who promoted self-determination, just not at home, where he was an ardent segregationist and a great Virginian in that sense, right? So the question that we want to be asking today is, how do we envision what peace looks like in the United States? How do we work towards that? And what is that vision, and how do those steps help us to re-understand or redefine the nature of our field? And so I'm just very, very happy to have Ajanet, Tehama, and Christie here today. So let's start here, everyone, and whoever would like to start, feel free to start. What is your vision of a peaceful United States of America? Thoughts?
I want to hear from Christie first, because this is your dissertation lane.
Yes, this is actually my dissertation topic.
It's why you're here.
Exactly, looking at this and looking at ideas and imagining sort of futuristic imaginings of peace. And I have to admit, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I thought I was up late last night sort of thinking about this question in particular. And my immediate response is, I don't know. Because I think it's my personal feelings about it are so deeply tempered by the realities. And is it even possible? I think part of me is asking that question, you know, first of all, what is peace, you know, and whose definition of peace are we using? Second of all, it's like, what is the United States, and whose definition of the United States are we using to define what America is, what the United States is? And then how those two things dovetail. I mean, you know, when you first invited us to this panel, this was before the lack of indictment for Breonna Taylor. You know, this was before the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And those situations have really gotten me thinking about this, you know, and frankly, I don't know. You know, I think it's a really tough question. You know, for me personally, it's a tough question. I feel like for many, peace, again, though we've learned about it in classes about right peace, I think for many, peace is the absence of conflict, the absence of obvious conflict, the sort of tamping down of social discord and disorder, and us all being civil and being able to talk to each other well and have conversation. But I don't think that's what peace is. I think peace, for me, is humanization. And it is everyone being able to access their full humanity in every possible situation. You know, living their lives as fully human as they possibly can, and not having systems that diminish that humanity at, you know, at every turn. I feel like, as certainly a Black woman living in America, my humanity is constantly being diminished, and I constantly have to shift and adjust myself. And maybe peace is not having to do that. Maybe for many, peace is living a life that allows you to access the full potential of your life without having any systems try to hamper that. So I mean, I think it's a really tough question. I feel kind of I've been thinking about it a lot, obviously, and I'm not sure the direction of that. Part of me just wants to say I don't know, but I think it can be a lot of things. I'm interested in hearing what my colleagues have to say.
I'm really hearing from Christie this sense of dehumanization and the difficulty of imagining, right? The sort of it requires an act of imagination, Christie, right now, and that's difficult to do at certain moments, to do that imagining.
Yes, I think so, and I think it's a courageous act to engage in that imagining. I mean, even the readings that I'm beginning to do with Dr. Lopez Bunyasi, who is my chair, it's a courageous act to even start. I know, I'm very excited. It's a courageous act to even start the imagination process. When you know the history of the country, you know the premise on which it's founded on, even beyond principles and the ideas that we like to say, but you know the realities of anti-Blackness, of anti, you know, womanness, the dehumanization of trans peoples, the dehumanizations of members of the queer community, the dehumanization of indigenous and all, you know, people who are brown and Black in this country. You know, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to get your mind out of the box and say, what could it be like? And so, you know, it's certainly, I think it's a courageous act to even engage in the imagination, to even engage in what's possible, to engage in, but I think if we, I'm not sure what would happen if we didn't do that, but I'd love to hear what Ajanet and Dr. Lopez Bunyasi would have.
Yeah. Any thoughts on Ajanet or Tehama?
I would.
Sorry, Ajanet.
Sorry. I would wholeheartedly agree with Christie in that the imagining is part of the resistance, right? The imagining of a United States that is actually united around the humanization of Americans, the humanization of other citizens of the world, and leading that conversation. That imagining is part of what I feel like is as a Black woman, a woman whose ancestors were enslaved on the soil of probably this state where I live in, maybe even in this neighborhood that I live in, were their wildest dreams, right? The imagining that right now we are having this conversation that would push us further to imagine what race and what peace can look like in a fully functioning United States, right? Like that actually is living up to its name. Yeah, I also think that it at the root of it needs to be the humanization of every person, not just men, not just women, not just Black, not just white. My fundamental being as the seed in which we build a further conversation around what peace and human rights looks like.
That act of imagination seems like a radical act that's sometimes difficult to do, but always possible, right? And that theme of humanization keeps coming through. I'm thinking about in the neck of the woods where I tend to have it academically, Amartya Sen talked about defining development as freedom, the sort of the people's full abilities to attain what they wish to attain. You used, I think, the phrase functionings in writing that, and you're both kind of reminding me of that work that comes from a long philosophical tradition that I don't know well. But Tehama, some thoughts?
I mean, I think Christie and Ajanet I like the injection of humanization into this conversation, because when we either participate or listen to people in the streets, the chant is no justice, no peace, right? And so there's this like linkage of justice to it, and people are always going to debate what justice means, as they should. And the humanization is a different measurement, or it's a different kind of quality than justice necessarily. I think they're linked. And yeah, well, for people to be held down from flourishing fully, I mean, I think that's one of the things we're talking about here in the realm of Black Lives Matter. It's not just about policing, and it's not just about the court system. It's about, what we're going to talk about, the structural element, that there's things that are connected that either do or do not allow us to flourish to the best of our abilities. And so peace doesn't mean that we can't, from my standpoint, doesn't mean we can't disagree with each other. That, to me, that's it's a different thing. But yeah, to be, and for your life to be valued. And it just, and what happened in Kentucky, it's like Breonna Taylor's life wasn't even in the room or something. It's like, and yet the neighbors were of greater consideration in some way, right? Like that's a kind of insanity. And so I appreciate the responses so far. I hope I can add to it in some other way.
And I think that's so fundamental. It's and I think one of the things I love about Stay Woke, about the book from Dr. Lopez Bunyasi and Dr. Candace Watts, is the fact that it's not saying, like I've had many people ask me, well, police lives matter and Latino lives matter, and but I think what the book really talks about, which has been instrumental to my learning, is that how to frame that conversation of, no, we're trying to get people to understand that Black lives matter too. We're not saying only, we're saying as well that our humanity has been diminished by these systems in which we live our everyday lives, you know, and the fact that myself and Ajanet as women of color, the fact that our life chances are far and away more diminished than yourselves are is an issue. It's a concern. The fact that we could, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day, that we could walk out of our homes or be in our homes and have law enforcement kick open the door, fire randomly, kill us, and nothing happen. It's shocking, and it's even beyond the sort of, you know, I tell people it's beyond even just the systematic. It's not esoteric. It's not theoretical. It's lived. We live in fear. We live with anxiety. It's a spiritual issue. It's a mental health issue. It's an emotional issue. It's this sort of stagnation that is going on in our bodies and our minds and our hearts and our spirits. And so, you know, peace for me would mean liberation of all that. Liberation from that fear, liberation from that having to adjust your behavior with law enforcement, having to adjust your behavior in a supermarket, having to adjust your hair for a job interview, having to adjust your language to talk to certain people, having to adjust the way you write, we're constantly doing these adjustments. I think, you know, all marginalized and minoritized people in this country are having to adjust themselves. And peace means liberation from having to adjust oneself from that. And I think Ajanet and Dr. Lopez Bunyasi put it so well. It's like, it's just being able to be steeped in your humanity, being able to be steeped in being a person and being able to live that out, for me at least.
And in coming as you are.
Yeah.
You know?
I think, Christie, you bring up an excellent point about, what did you say? About how the boundaries are restrictive, right? The boundaries that are placed on the life of the marginalized. And we're resisting on the margins, and we're trying to bring a recentering of, or bringing our conversation, our lives, our narrative into the center, but the center keeps moving. Like, we can't, it's as though white supremacy doesn't even recognize what it is, who it represents. And so because it doesn't know, yet the system is set up to function and to maintain it. But even the people that are privileged within it are like, oh, I don't know. I don't recognize my own privilege. I can have a lack of integrity, even though it's on videotape. Lindsey Graham, let's not go there. But we can say whatever we want. We can do whatever we want. And the boundaries are consistently moving, and the people within the system don't even call out the injustice that is within the system. So people on the margins are doing that without voice or without stake in the system from jump. So Black and brown people are consistently pushed back against, going, well, you don't understand, or you're just ungrateful to be here, or you're just complaining, or whatever. And what else is necessary for us to show you how unjust the system is, when a Black woman can sleep in her bed and be shot and killed, and there's still no justice? Like, you still don't find value even in a sleeping Black woman in her home, or a Black man eating a bowl of ice cream in his underwear in his house. I mean, where's the line, and why does the line keep moving every time it's convenient for you? So the question that I feel like Black and brown people, particularly Black people in this moment where we've had George Floyd, Botham Jean, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Rashad Brooks. I mean, let's just talk about just this summer, right? The summer of our discontent, again, 2020, as opposed to 1963. What just this span of time is. And then how is it that white people don't have a response to that, except to say, well, the system isn't as unjust as you're making it out to be. Well, you don't live the life that we live. So how do you know that it's not unjust? You see these things, you recycle these, you retweet, you repost, you watch our videos, you watch our pain, you glory in that, but you somehow still don't see the devaluing of our life and why you think that would even continue to have us sit under this banner of united, when you don't even see me as valued as you. Like, the life that I live, you don't live.
Yeah.
And you don't find that disconcerting and are wanting to work to change that. That's the part that for me as a Black woman in 2020 that I'm still wrestling with. How is it that we don't have more empathy?
And that our words are
compassion.
Right, and that our words are not enough. Our experiences are not enough. Our pain is not enough. Our tears are not enough. Our protests, our kneeling, our marching, our sitting, our writing, our photograph taking, our videos, nothing is enough. I think that's the other part. Nothing's enough. You know, we can't take enough video. We can't write enough stories. We can't do enough educating. We can't do enough protesting, sitting, marching, kneeling. It's never enough.
It's never enough if someone is blind and deaf.
Right.
And so thank you for this discussion. And I'm wondering about a kind of a different question, because what I'm hearing, for example, in Ajanet, in your last comment, especially talking about how do, and Christie, you're bringing this up too, how to translate African Americans' experience to something that when so many people have been so blind, so willfully blind to that experience, so willfully deaf to that experience. And it brings up a question for me that I've long wrestled with ever since I arrived here at the Carter School 11 years ago, is how, because what I'm hearing from you is that a practice of peace building in the United States, in this place and in this time, renders useless many of the tools possibly that the field has developed over time as peace building tools, as conflict resolution tools. And so I'm wondering, for all of you, when you think about what this act of imagination might look like, what does the field of conflict resolution have to offer? And what should it be offering, and how should it be changing to help that imagination become not just an imagination that people can ignore, but a reality in our lives, in your lives? How does the field need to change, or what does it need to do?
I think the field, I personally think the field needs to look like this. It needs to have Black and Latina and Indigenous voices.
Correct.
Not on the margin, not as subjects to be studied, but center and a part of the conversation. I mean, how is it that the field is built around white male voices who have lived and observed from a distance, a white gaze, right? As Fanon would say, a white gaze on the the responses or the lived experiences of Black and Brown people to colonization, to imperialism, to every other ism that those white scholars don't include in their analysis of that conflict. Yet we have built an entire field around those voices and excluded the voices of the people on the ground. That doesn't make any sense, as those people on the ground's voices don't matter, even though it's their lived experience. So,
and even when there are scholarly works, even there are like, you know, I'm reading right now people like D.G. Kelly, and even when there are scholars who are talking about these things, they aren't included, right? You know, we you know, we use Fanon all the time, but there's whole scholars coming out of the Caribbean tradition, coming out of, you know, Francophone tradition, coming out of the British tradition, you know, whether they're scholars or not, whether you're talking about Claudia Jones and other people like that who are coming out of a new tradition, and not even new, who are coming out of traditions that we're not even looking at. You know, we love to hold up, you know, peace builders and peacemakers that resonate right now with the field. For example, Martin Luther King Jr. We love, because his image currently, the way we have distilled his work now, we like what that says and we want to bring that into our canon. But, you know, we're ignoring much more radical works here in the United States of all people of all backgrounds. We're ignoring the intersections between class and race and gender. I just don't think that we're not bringing in critical race theory. We're not bringing in, you know, indigenous voices, as Ajanet said. I just feel like, because our field continues to be really centered, as Ajanet said, on this white gaze, on this very privileged, not just white, but also very class privileged, very elitist kind of gaze. That's why it feels like the tools aren't appropriate. Because the people who are moving these movements forward, like Black Lives Matter, these aren't ivory tower academics.
Right, exactly.
These are people on the ground, putting their bodies literally on the line, and we need to listen to them. You know, we need to hear their voices in our work. We need to listen, and I keep flogging stay woke, but that's something that I really saw in that book as well, is that we need to be listening to the boots on the ground, the feet on the ground, the grassroots organizers, the activists who are in the streets. Without them, we're just theorists talking to ourselves. And that is not going to, for me, I feel, not going to change practice or theory, frankly, in the future.
Tehama, in this work you've done, I know you contemplate a lot of this in the written word and in your own sort of practice. You contemplated these questions a lot. I want to see what you wanted to add to the.
It seems to me that a lot of the things that we read and study and talk about in this field are about studying other people's conflicts. And when we study our own and the ones that we are part of, the ones that we perpetuate and the ones that we are put up against the wall with, then I think there's also just a different lens of just owning, saying, this is my conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So that I, you know, in my role as educator, I am facilitating various conversations in the classroom. But as I see my praxis, as I see my activism, I am typically not mediating anything, because my aim is not to mediate anything. In those roles, my role is to agitate. And so that is a different position than when, I mean, there are things that I studied that are further away from my life experience. But in writing Stay Woke, you know, I am a Mexican-American biracial woman with a white mother. I wrote this book with my Black American friend and colleague. And there was a whole back and forth, just that process was rigorous for us, because there were times where it was like, you know, we had a different way of coming at things. And at some point we thought about putting in the book our disagreements. But as we kept talking, those disagreements, actually, we like pulled each other from one side to the other on various things. And we ended up, there were times I just was like, did I write this or did you write this? I forget. You know what I mean? And, but we, you know, to name those identities of ours, like, is important for saying, okay, like, this is her conflict in a different way than it is mine, but this is still my conflict. It is my conflict as somebody who can be harmful and perpetuate anti-Blackness, and who also is harmed by anti-Blackness. And until people who are not Black understand that they are also harmed by anti-Blackness, and that's what I was talking about with interest convergence. When people understand what is at stake for them in working towards, you know, equity, justice, it's gonna be real hard. And so, like, you know, I have my own relationships center me differently in that, but anti-Blackness also limits my life.
Yes.
So until we like, I really appreciate and I love I think with the goodness and the intention of white people who are saying, I just want to get out of the way for, you know, just let me get out of the way and let Black people do their thing. And I'm like, okay, there's something beautiful about that, and also a problem, because you need to imagine something that's better for you, because this whole thing, this contract is selling everybody short. Black people have the worst of it, but you got sold short too. And so to come back to the question of what is it for the field and the tools, is like, this is our embeddedness. And for that to be, you know, again, I'm not trying to mediate.
I think what you said though was key, Dr. Lopez Bunyasi, because it's this sort of thing of, and I'll just put this out there, as a field who studies conflict, some of us are the most conflict avoidant people I've ever met. There isn't the desire to contestation with each other. We are not willing to dig into our own systems, our own complicity. We're not willing to dig into our own ideas. We're not willing to stand in the heat with each other and not understand each other and not get along and not have a kumbaya moment at the end where everything's mediated. Congratulations. We're not. I think that's part of what the field needs to regain, or to really to, when looking at this conflict, really resurrect, because the need to stand in the fire with each other, I think, is necessary. And I think also that there's a power in that. There's real power, and then understanding of, this is not just a conflict that Black people are fighting against or engaged in, or people of color are engaged in, or trans people. No, this is about all of us. We are in this conflict, in this conflict together. We are in different ways complicit. We are in different ways disempowered and dehumanized, all of us, right? And so having that understanding of it makes sure that we all have skin in the game. It's not just my skin, right? It's everybody's skin that should be engaged in this. We all need to be engaged in it. And like you said, you know, when you have that color blindness of, I don't see race, or that, let me just give Black people their space, you're again avoiding the conflict, even if it's good intent, you know, even if your intention is good, you're still avoiding it. And what I need you to do, and you know, I've had discussions with others about what allyship looks like. I need you to step into the flame. Sometimes you need to put yourself in front of me, right? Sometimes you need to step in front of me and be that barrier so that I can heal or do my work or do sometimes I need you to put your body on the line too. And that's what allyship is. I need you to stand in the flame with me. And not just sort of give me my space, because that's not always helpful. I mean, it's necessary, but sometimes I need you to create the barrier so that we can have our space, stand in front of us so that we can have our moment. So yeah, I agree.
But what those responses are really telling us, I think, from Christie and from Tehama, right, is that the set of tools and maybe the set of skills needed to engage in this work, to take Tehama's point, is a move away from questions of mediating or facilitating. Those still might be good skills to have. Yeah. That the real practice is agitation. And to take Christie's point, a willingness to engage in extreme amounts, possibly, of discomfort and difficulty in conversation with other people. And that's a very different set of practices than are the standard or the canonical right set of practice that we usually think of when we think of the field, right? And Tehama, I'm going to use a word from Agnieszka Paczenska that she would use, right? That's sort of a practice of contentious politics, a practice of contention and agitation, right? And that is a practice that, to go back to all your answers from the beginning, to a question of humanization and imagining, and then alleviating this need on Black bodies to engage in only certain sorts of repertoires for fear of the reaction of white people in this country. That to do that, the alleviation of that injustice requires a very, very different set of tools, a very, very different imagination of what our field looks like. But Ajanet, I'm stopping you I'm just trying to collect some answers.
I keep in my head right now, what's going on is, do we believe that certain people only belong in certain places? That is the question for me. Because when we're looking at this conversation of Black Lives Matter, it's, do you see me as a person born in America, or do you only see me as a Black body, right? Do you see me as an American who, when I go to vote, may have my vote suppressed solely because of the color of my skin, not because of the origin of my birth? Do you recognize, do you understand that because of that, that puts me in a second-class citizenry space in America? And then in the academy, the exclusion of people who look like me as professors, as on syllabi, in libraries, what does that say to me as a student, but also as a person who is attempting to participate in this field, in the academy? Then on top of that, we talk about the field specific of conflict analysis and resolution, but we don't have Indigenous voices represented. We, again, going back to Tehama's point, we don't talk about agitation. We don't talk about Tilly and contentious politics. We don't study social movements. We're not talking about Nobel Peace Prize winners and their narratives and the things that they've done, let alone the fact that, some of the Nobel Peace Prize winners of late have come from the global South. We're not talking about that. We're not introducing those people to. So what exactly does the field stand for, and who is it standing with? Because where I'm sitting, it's not standing with me, and the people who look like me, and the people who are fighting like me. Talking about climate change, why are we not talking about Wangari Maathai? I mean, the very simple fact that she started the Greenbelt movement in Kenya to provide for for trees and clearing the air and to provide income for women in Kenya. I mean, why are we talking about that? That is climate change and environmental justice at the core by Nobel Peace Prize winner. We're not talking about her. Like, but why? And that is, I don't understand. We're not talking about what President of Colombia did with the FARC and the peace that he brought there, even though Colombia still has its issues but we're not talking about that. We're talking about whatever we're talking about. I mean, I'm thinking about also going back to the allyship. I'm thinking about Mrs. Jemison in 1960s when she lived in Birmingham, Alabama, and began to get harassing phone calls from members of the Klan who were, because she was in the trenches with Black people in Birmingham, and she said to her husband and her friends, wow, I finally begin to understand what it's like to be Black. That is allyship. What does it feel like to you to be me? Can you feel that? And I think that is part of the conversation that we need to have as a department, as a field, and as the academy. What does it feel like for you, people of privilege? Can you begin to have empathy for people who do not have or have been considered second class in every aspect of life and society?
I mean, if I could sort of summarize a little bit of
really quick, Christie, I'd like us to get to Q&A in a minute, so maybe kind of a last couple of comments from Christie and Tehama, and then let's move on to Q&A. Sorry
about that. My battery is running low. One of the things, for me, it's like I'm tired of being the exception. I'm tired of being the token. I'm tired of being the anomaly. I'm tired of this not being a robust conversation. And yes, and to Ajanet's point, even within the global South and marginalized and minoritized communities around the world, whether you're talking about Palestinian scholars or Afro-Latino scholars coming out of Colombia, but for me as a Black American whose roots are people who.
Well, I thought we had escaped our bad Zoom mojo today, but apparently we haven't. Tehama, a last set of thoughts. Sorry, I'm yanking you away. You were listening.
Yeah, no. So what I was thinking about when Ajanet was talking was thinking about some critical whiteness scholars raise the question of whether empathy is either possible sometimes for white people or even the thing that is the goal. Because in this argument, it's that because they are not similarly positioned, to know what that is like is great difficulty until somebody is put into the harm's way of white supremacy because they are white, because white people can be burned by white supremacy, and in that moment, yes, like they get closer to it. But perhaps what are the greater aims? So it doesn't mean that we should give up on something like that. But to get back to the point of humanity is just remember that people are humans and that they are, that's what I try to push for, at least in my class, is just remember each other's humanity. You may not be able to relate to another very well right now. Maybe at times you will. But remember that you are human, that somebody will say something that you're going to classify as ignorant, but it's really not ignorant because what it is something, first of all, maybe offensive and something you don't agree with. And on another week, that person may come around to something else, and it may be your turn to make the faux pas. And that is recognizing humanity, at least in those kind of classroom spaces sometimes, is like growth and change and dynamism, right? And in that, recognizing that, oh, that those are human emotions, those are human thoughts, those are human contributions. They may not be mine, but they belong here. These people are sufficient just as they are. And so, I mean, I think differently sometimes about empathy, but the point of just seeing each other as human for me is like, yes, let's do that.
And that's a nice way of Tehama. That's a really what I love about what you just said is that it kind of brings us back to where we started, actually, right, with questions of dehumanization, right? That Christie especially was bringing up early on in her comments, right? That do we see each other? This basic question, and it's more than empathy. And I've been thinking a lot about empathy recently, but especially now, right? Especially in this time that we live in. But I like that questioning of empathy and thinking, do we see each other as human? Which is something that's just more, this is a very, very different question than just thinking empathetically. So to Christie, who is not here, and to Ajanet and
Power
Tehama,
went out. Her power went out.
Oh no! Oh gosh, poor Christie. So to Christie and to Ajanet and to Tehama, thank you so much. And what we've had an amazingly we've had a remarkably. Oh wait a minute, is she in the attendees then now, and not in the? Yes. Okay, let me make her. Excuse me, everyone. I can't smoothly talk and do Q&A and do this stuff at the same time. So there you go. Okay, I've done that now. So Christie should be back as a panelist now.
Yeah.
And there she is. All right. So we have 32 people who are attendees who have somehow weathered all the technical snafus and shown up at 9 a.m. or roughly 9 a.m. on a Friday morning. I want to see if people are amenable to going a little bit longer. Ajanet, Tehama, Christie, are y'all okay?
Yeah.
Going a little bit longer. I was wondering if we can spend some time answering questions. For those of you who are here as attendees, there are a couple things you can do. There's a Q&A box that you can open up. You can ask things in the chat box as well. Or if you want, you can chat to me and I can briefly make you a panelist and you can just ask your question live. Which might actually just be the best thing, and I can put you back to being an attendee because I have that sort of awesome power. But I have a question from Chip, who's the first person to type something into the Q&A box, and I'll read it. I think y'all can see it, but I'll read it out loud because I don't think everyone can see it. But Chip says, I'm listening to this as a 1960s activist who got into this work to change my own country, and B, having just spent an hour in therapy. And my reaction is our field has little or nothing to contribute until we learn that, as Christie put it, we all have skin in this game. So my question is, how do you get old privileged white guys like me to become more than an ally in her terms? How do you convince us that we need the kinds of skills that Thomas was talking about? For me, mediating is not just the heart of this. Agitation is as a peaceful way is. Thoughts about kind of an answer there from Chip?
Just thinking, I'm trying to process the question, and it sounds like, how do we recruit white people? It's kind of like in a boiled down sense, and you know, they gotta want it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and the thing is, like, for white people to see what's in it for them is the best recruitment tool for them. And I think that plenty of people of color have made the arguments for years about why that is. The most recent being Ian Haney Lopez's creation of the Race Class Academy, which I love as a tool. Check it out. Like 2-minute videos. He has a whole system of learning about this stuff. And yeah, I mean, like, because the other thing is, like, yeah, white people need to get on board. At the same time, like, people of color are mobilizing their own communities. Like,
Right.
looking at November 3rd, we're mobilizing our own communities because if we don't show up, ooh, you know what I'm saying? So there's that work too.
Right.
White people have to want it for themselves. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah.
I think to add on to that, I have family members, you know, from Buckingham, Virginia, and I have a family member who used to say all the time, "Get your cousin." as in, you know, for white folk, get your cousin, like, call it out. Like, don't just sit there and accept it. Don't say, oh, that's not what he meant, whether you're in a meeting of 5 or a meeting of 500. I think again, making yourselves uncomfortable, questioning your own assumptions all the time, and then calling in or calling out, or however you want to do that, other people who look like you, who are in the same privileged position of you, wherever your privilege is, and turning to them and saying, you know what, let's not tell that joke. I don't appreciate that. Here's why what you just said is dehumanizing. And even if you don't want to use, because I think the word in many ways, racism, and that has lost some of its teeth. But if you want to say, you know, that's dehumanizing, what you just said, maybe we should talk about it at another time. But, you know, they have to, you know, and it's not a canceling or a calling out culture that I'm talking about. It's being willing to step again into the fire, into the flame, and stand there in the uncomfortable moment and look at someone and say, we need to have a deeper conversation of this. Let's do it. I think that's part of it as well.
Speaking only for myself here, and my approach to movement building is not with snark. And if I feel like, you know, if I say something that is offensive or it was ill-informed or something, what I would feel personally, if somebody said, Tehama, listen, what you said, this is the problem that I see with this, okay? And it made me feel a certain way. But I think you should keep working towards this. I think you should still, you know, and this idea, like, I think we have to know where we feel comfortable saying, but listen, I want you to still come with us. I want you to still work towards this, you know, is because people don't want to be left behind. They don't want to be stigmatized. They don't want to be like, you know, they put their self out there for a moment. They said something wrong or whatever, misaligned or whatever it is. And then all they get is chastised, but with no road to moving forward, to correction, to betterment. And so what I'm trying, at least in my life, like sometimes it's exhausting to do that, but because I'm, you know, thinking about those one-on-one relationships or those, you know, talking to 5 people at once kind of relationships, listen, you know, think about it. You can have feelings about how guilty you feel, how crappy you feel. And when you're ready, pull yourself up again and keep trying, keep working, because I am personally open to people who have said and done treasonous things, correcting themselves and becoming loyal to humanity. If that's what they want to do and they want to keep trying, I want them to move in that direction. And I think, you know, Christie, you mentioned cancel culture. There's a tension right now between accountability and discipline.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's like, you know, like I want accountability, and I want it, and I'm on a committee right now about curriculum and pedagogy. I want all of us as educators to bring the best for our students here at Mason, right? Now, we're not always going to get it right because nobody taught us how to teach.
Right. Right.
There are no guidelines. There are no guidelines. And in fact, where guidelines exist, they are contradictory about how to run your classroom. So when an educator falls short, they too should get an opportunity to correct, right? If we're serious about this, it's not just about, you know, giving that opportunity to our students. I think it's to giving it to our, you know, our educators as well. And at the same time, accountability, right? But you know, if a person has a really whack, you know, syllabus, are you going to lose your job and possibly career over it? Or do you get a chance to make it better? You know, I've been thinking a lot about that lately.
I've been thinking a lot about the fact that in many, you know, Tehama, like, you know, a little bit like you, I grew up in, you know, very deeply steeped in Mexican American culture, and there's a lot I could say about how Mexican American culture has its questions about color and race in ways that are, I was praised for being fair. My brother is about 10 shades darker than I am. We have the same parents, right? Just how Mexican Americans treat questions of race is incredibly interesting, and there've been volumes written about it. But I grew up in a culture that almost certainly had a view of African Americans that was completely that I now look back at now, and I look back at things that I heard, that I said, that I did myself, and I'm horrified at myself. And the times when I grew is when someone pulled me aside and did exactly what you're talking about. But I'm also wondering about the fact that that's a lot of emotional work for people to do, right? That's hard work. That's uncomfortable, hard work for people to do. And so I don't know, Ajanet, you wanted to jump in, but I've been thinking about when I've grown, it's because someone has done earnestly what you've done. But I'm also realizing that has placed a burden on people around me.
Right. I think you bring up a great point. I to answer Chip's question, I think I would say to Chip, you were an activist in the 1960s. I don't know what that activism looked like, but surely it's still somewhere deep within you. So tap into what pushed you to join the movement in the 1960s. Because honestly, the issues are still the same. Let's just be frank. But I would also say for people who are unsure of where to start, Tehama, Dr. Lopez Bunyasi's book, chapter 2, or is it chapter 3? Like 25 pages of definitions of words that are just thrown out, and that people are just like, yeah, we know what that means, but you really don't. I would say start there. Educate yourself, and then ask someone who is Black or brown to help you along the journey. Understanding that all of us, even though we may have similar skin shades, we do not exist in a monolith. Like, all of our experiences are not the same. So that's what I would say to start with. Start with reading, educating yourself, understanding the truth about the words that we are saying. What does it mean now for the conversation around defunding the police? A couple of weeks ago, maybe you didn't understand it, but maybe now, in light of the Breonna Taylor lack of indictment and lack of justice, maybe you want to revisit what defunding the police might actually mean for the Black and brown community. But on top of that, what did the Black Panther movement do for Black and brown communities around the defunding of certain things in order to place things into Black and brown communities that didn't exist because the government wasn't doing it for them? So you have to take what is going on now, and circle back through history and say, what have Black people been attempting to do in their own communities aside from the government, outside of the government, to help their own people? And then what was the government's response or lack of response to that? And then how can I, as an ally, as an educated person now, in the resistance, in the struggle, begin to align myself with those things? I think that is where we need to be right now. And what does that look like for changing policy? What does that look like for changing syllabi? What does that look like for changing departmental culture? Because it is a lot of emotional labor, as Thomas has said, but it's emotional labor when non-marginalized people come to marginalized people and say, what do I need to do? And you've not done any work before you've come to us. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that is where the labor becomes, I don't know how to, I'm like,
Tell me what to do. Ajanet, tell me what to do.
400 years, yeah. Like, find a decade and read about it.
And like, truth be told, that, you know, marginalized communities are also seeking information for themselves.
Yes.
Because people aren't telling
Yes.
them, right?
Correct.
So, you know, that's not like there's a special JSTOR page, just for right? Like, I mean, it's open to everybody. You can go down all those rabbit holes, and you know, it's just about us being curious about possibilities of organizing, relating differently, and restructuring, and listening, and to the point about, you know, doing that hard labor. This is why I think there's a really important role for white people to work with other white people, and then, you know, if you're a person of color and willing to do that work, that's cool. If you're a person of color and is not willing to do that work, there's other work to be doing. So the mobilization piece, energy go elsewhere. And it's just, everyone's gonna have a different role and maybe at different times in movement building, I think.
And just to something that to him,
y'all,
curiosity. Sorry, no, go ahead, Thomas.
Go ahead, Christie, go ahead. I want to have more questions.
Okay, I just want to say curiosity. I think that's huge. You have to be curious. You have to be willing to do the work and to use your curiosity to investigate it, to find out the information. I think that's key.
I think that it's so funny, Christie, kind of curiosity and imagination are two of the things that I've heard from you a lot today, right? And I think you're right. I think you have to want to know about something.
Yes.
Right. Audrey Williams, who also, like Christie, wears many hats at the Carter School, wanted to ask a question. So Christie, you should be able to ask your question now.
Oh, yes.
Great.
Yeah, okay, you can hear me. All right, I just love seeing all of you in the same Zoom square. Wish it were in person, but one day. But I have really, really appreciated this. I am not usually up and ready to go at 9 a.m. and this was such a great, you know, just to be candid, this was such a great way to start the day. And it's really got me thinking. And I wanted to ask all of you if you could talk a little bit more about this kind of concept, and Tehama, I'm really glad you brought it up, of agitation. Because I feel like in this field, we're really, you know, a lot of people are really, really good about talking about, okay, how do we get people to the table? How do we de-escalate? How do we bring down the heat in the room, right? And I think that generally speaking, you know, that is a move, right? That is a move that should be taken in many cases, but I think we aren't very good about talking about when is it right for the move to actually be bringing up the heat. And you all have talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to just kind of dive in a little bit more and like maybe even talk about like what is it going to take for us to get to a place in the field where we can talk more about that? Because I also feel like this idea of de-escalation and mediation, that's also something that, right, is expected, I feel like sometimes, of the people who are in the weaker position in the room, whether it's because you're in the weaker position because of your gender, or whether it's because you're in the weaker position of your race, or whether it's because you're in the weaker position of both. I feel like sometimes we expect people in the weaker position to be more quote unquote peaceful, right? And by which we mean de-escalatory. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about agitation and like where we might be able to go as a field in terms of really engaging critically with it in a way that also, you know, recognizes that we are a field that does not want to engage with it, maybe in the way that needs to be.
I like the way that you framed the heating up and cooling down, and because it is, because I think we need to emphasize that when we're talking about like heating up, that we're not talking about dehumanizing other people while we're heating up, and we're not talking about violence. I mean, I think that most of us are not talking about violence, right? And I'm not going to spend my time, particularly like as an educator, as a researcher, you know, strategizing with violence, right? But people are strategizing with violence, and we also should understand what that's about. And to just say that like you can turn up the heat on something and people won't get bodily harmed. You can turn on the heat on something and not insult other people in the process. I think what turning up the heat means is pushing the envelope and saying, this is urgent. We need to do this right now. Here are the things that I am demanding. And there are certain things that we will not compromise on. And that is legitimate. There are certain things that we will not compromise on. And that, you know, and that's a very different paradigm than talking about how you're going to settle perhaps land disputes,
Right.
or some kind of like direct war, right? Like it with over those kind of like resources. I mean, there's something different there. And yet we are talking about resources. You know, we are talking about lives and how they should be treated. That there's strategy. I think we need to talk about strategy. And I think to the point about like who's weak in the room and that person is expected to be peaceful, that person is also managed, and their emotions and their words and sometimes their behavior is read as itself, you know, and is somehow being imagined as weaponized. And so what we have to legitimate spectrums of feelings. Sometimes there are people who speak very softly like this. And then there are just people who get animated and they talk like this and they're moving their hands, and it's okay to move your hands as long as you're not smacking the person next to you, right? I mean, it's okay. And that's what it means to like make some cultural space. Like it was so funny. When I was doing a postdoc, I did some interview, and one of my girlfriends pulled me aside. She's also Mexican-American biracial. And she was like, Tehama, do you know how much talk with your hands? And I was like, I have no idea, right? And like, I was like everywhere. And she showed me this. I was like, oh yeah. And like, and how that gets read, particularly for Black women, or, you know, like, you know, we gotta let that happen and not see that as an insult to somebody else, right? And I think it's okay to also being like saying, how do you feel right now? And a person says, I feel angry, and be like, okay, you know, it's not a permanent status of relationship of how people are going to relate. Like the person is talking about something that's meaningful to them. And I think that's part of kind of like our mood, you know, that we set. And, but if we think about the strategy, the training of escalating certain types of conflict, I think, you know, let's embrace that. I mean, that is politics. That's how things get done.
I mean, I keep saying that we have to get a lot more comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think we have to put that as into part of our skills development and our training. We have to become a lot more comfortable with sitting in the heat and taking heat from people, you know, and knowing that emotion, you know, in mediation and facilitation and all these skills, emotion is part of that, you know. And I'm starting to be a part of workshops now where one of the first things that groups are starting to do is just letting people vent, not even engaging in the discussion, just letting people get out what they're feeling, how they're sharing their emotion, and being listened to and having their feelings validated. Because I think a lot of times when we say turn down the heat or de-escalation, sometimes we're devaluing people's lived experiences and their feelings and their emotions that come out of those lived experiences. And I think a key thing that we have to do as practitioners is really allow for that space. You know, I'm not saying that it has to derail everything and it should be the only thing we focus on, but the need to be validated in those types of spaces, in those types of situations, and not to be read as Dr. Lopez Bunyasi said, as one thing or the other. As you see, I'm talking with my hands now, or that not to read our passion as anger, you know, or not to read our frustration as aggression, you know, to just let it be in this space, and learning as practitioners how to do that better, I think, is important.
And that means fundamentally widening the cultural repertoires that with which we communicate. There's a particular way that people, especially in the academy, you know, tend to communicate with each other, and it means fundamentally widening how we talk to each other and how we communicate with each other in very kind of multi-layered ways. We have a bunch more questions, and I was kind of flipping through a few of them. I'll read Scheherazade Jafari. So she said, "Thanks very much for this rich conversation. I'm sorry to have missed the beginning of it. I love your thoughts on that ongoing question of when to work toward complete dismantling versus working within and through the system, within academia in particular. Do you have hope for academia and specifically for our field? And what gives you hope? Or is academia fundamentally structured and rooted within racism and requiring a radical change, or both?" So a nice, easy question from Scheherazade, from Dr. Jafari. I know I have my own thoughts here, but I'm here to be a mediator. Any thoughts from the three of you? With the understanding that a junior faculty member and 2 doctoral students are perhaps might feel a little bit worried about how they answer this question sometimes. But any thoughts from the three of you?
Yeah, so I would say yes, that the education system, the American education system, is rooted in racism. That we know. We can look at enslaved narratives and see how white slave owners forbade their enslaved persons from learning to read because they felt that if they learned to read, then they would not feel like they could be enslaved anymore. And then we had the freedom schools, the freedmen's schools, created by enslaved persons to educate our communities and the communities, and then HBCUs. And so, yes, short answer for that, yes. Then second, I would ask the question, in the academic space, and I'm not a political scientist at all, or an IR specialist at all, but I would say that I would ask the question, in those environments where conversations about dismantling or working within, who are the spoilers in those situations? Because they exist. And are those spoilers, what is the role, or what is the stance of the spoiler? Because the spoiler is going to spoil whatever you're trying to accomplish, because they are they're protecting the status quo. And so I would say, identify the spoiler, and if you can, remove the spoiler from being part of the conversation, because they're not working towards peace. They're not working towards a resolution. They're working towards the maintenance of oppression. They're working towards the maintenance of the status quo. And so if that person or those people are unremovable, then we need to talk about another part of the conversation, which would be the agitation and the dismantling of the system. Because I would argue that the education system, full stop, needs to be dismantled, because as we talked about here in this conversation, the suppression of marginalized narrative is so embedded within it, and the lack of diversity, the lack of representation remains persistent, even as we go higher into education. 6 or 7 Black, African, or 2 Latin representations in this conversation, that's not representative of society, American society, or the world. How are we going to begin to become more representative? And then what is what is white supremacy's role in suppressing that representation? I think that those are questions that we need to begin to ask as the Academy.
I'm gonna
Tehama or Christie? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm gonna go with the question where she said, "Do I have hope in the Academy?" I don't have hope in the Academy. I have hope in education. I've had the pleasure, and again, it's not because she's my chair, it's just because she's also one of my favorite people.
Enough.
I've had the pleasure of watching Dr. Lopez Bunyasi teach. And when you're in a classroom with an educator who is pulling out ideas. I was a TA last year, and we had a student, and we were having this conversation, and the student pulled us aside later and said, "This was such an amazing class. I had no idea what structural violence was." And like this big thing above my head right now, it was like, ding, this is it. This is the thing. This was the moment. This is when I fell in love with teaching. And I was just like, yes, if this is what I can do for a student, a single student whose life is now going to look at things differently because of something I said in class, yes, like I have hope in that. One of the things I love about teaching undergraduates is that you're just a little less jaded than graduate students are, and they're open to ideas. I remember teaching Stay Woke, and students in my class were like, "Wow, this is amazing!" And it's just, I have hope in education, right? I have hope in the ability of woke scholars and educators standing in front of the classroom and teaching well these topics. Do I have hope in academia in terms of whether it's going to change its structure and the way to have these opportunities in order to teach? It's a resounding no. But what I'm learning is that for those of us who are coming into the field, that this is the crucible. Today, I don't know what it is with me and fire analogies, but this is the crucible. This is the plane that we have to cross in order to have this opportunity. You know, in order to have the chance to stand, the privilege to stand in front of the classroom and open young minds, then if this is what I have to do, then I'm willing to do it. I don't necessarily feel that academia is willing to change. I think it's like Ajanet stated, it's steeped in privilege, not just white supremacy, but just steeped in patriarchal, gendered privilege, cis privilege. It's just steeped in it. And I hope that my presence in academia cracks that just a little bit. And more people like myself, more people like the people in this conversations, more people like Ajanet, if we can stand the crucible and we just, every one of us who gets in the door pushes the door open a little bit more. But I have hope in education. I absolutely have hope in that.
Tehama, any thoughts here that you care to add?
I'm on the Curriculum and Pedagogy Committee of the Anti-Racism Inclusive Excellence Task Force. And we are asking ourselves, in a way, I mean, there's a question of what is already being done well. Because something's being done well, right? So when you think about education broadly or schooling broadly, you know, this is where the pragmatist in me comes out, is like, okay, what's already being done well? Like, so that doesn't need to necessarily be destroyed, but broadened, those kind of things, because building something from the ground up is hard. And so that's where my pragmatism is like, what can we get rid of some things but keep this other stuff that's doing really well? And you know, Christie, your point, like you being in that classroom is shaping lives. I've heard this week actually from a lot of undergrad students who said that very thing about you and about the other panelists who came to my undergrad class, Emily Sample and Twain Hickman. They were so appreciative of the kind of questions that the three of you were asking and sharing your journeys in education and demystifying, you know, this process. Because the thing that's one of the problems about the Academy is that it is not, because it's not well understood. It's not clear how anyone participates in it. It's not clear, you know, this mystery of like creating knowledge as though it only happened here and not out in the world, or like, you know, we came in as blank slates or something like, and so I think there are some people who are doing really good stuff. A lot of this is money. So when the money is put in place to make changes, I think changes can be made.
You know, Tehama, I'm thinking about there's a way you said, like, a lot of people don't understand how academia works, right? And I think, I know, in my thinking about my own personal experience, you know, I grew up in a working class Mexican American family, right? And then it was like, and then, you know, I got, you know, my brother had shown the route of going to college. I was like, okay, I'm going to go to college, right? And then, you know, when I got to college and I saw my professors, I was like, I could do that. I'd like to do that. Right? Like, I want to, you know, I want to be this cool guy who lectures in front of 200 people, right? And then I put all the work to make that happen, right? Yeah, so I graduated school in 2000 and I studied and I worked and I tried to write and I didn't write well and I tried to write better. And all the time, that sense of like, I want to join them up there. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to go join that group up there, right? And you do all this work in 15 years, I think, after I started, you know, graduate school, there was a vote to say I would have tenure, and then 16 years later, in 2016, I become an associate faculty member. And you do all that time getting there, and it's like, wait a minute, I just joined an inherently conservative institution, right? Like, my whole career has been about essentially joining an institution that it exists in part to protect its own privileges, right? Which is it was, I think, at the core what Scheherazad's asking. Right. And now I'm director of graduate programs, right? Now, 20 years after I started graduate school, I'm a director of graduate programs. And I'm like, and, you know, last night I was up too late, and thank God, because it was one of those things that saves you. Coming to America was on. And there's this really, really great line at the end in which James Earl Jones says, "Who am I to change tradition?" And the Queen says, "I thought you were the king." Right. And I thought it's a brilliant line. Right? Who are we to change things? Would they who are experiencing the privilege have the power to change things? And I think in the end, my optimism or pessimism in response to Scheherazad's point depends on exactly what Ajanet and Christie, I think, were both talking about in some of their answers previously, which is to say, are we capable as an inherently privileged group of people to sit back and try to recognize that privilege, to take Tehama's breaking the racial contract book? Can we actually recognize that privilege and see how it works, and then be honest about how we need to reform and revolutionize what we do as a result? And I think that's, I don't know if I'm pessimistic or optimistic. I think it changes from hour to hour and moment to moment and day to day, but it depends on my answer to that question. When I see my colleagues and my friends not doing that, you know, there was a moment several years ago where a dear colleague of mine, in response to someone saying we need to be able to put, you know, we got to be able to tell people, like, you need to do your syllabus this way to recognize this problem we've been having in teaching. And this person, who I love, used the phrase states' rights to say, no one can change me and my syllabus. This is my free world over here to do whatever I want to. And I was like, ooh, that's a weird metaphor, right? And that moment I was really pessimistic, right? But there are other moments where I'm more optimistic. And I think we're in a better place now, but I don't know. That's not an answer to Scheherazad's question, but it is to say that we're an eminently conservative institution. Universities are, they always have been, they always will be. Right. And my method of change is oftentimes more outside in than inside out. But the people who have privilege can make change. And yeah, sorry, that was a little bit longer and more passionate than I meant it to be. We still have 22 people around, and our panelists, are y'all up for just maybe a few more minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to keep going.
I can go to 11.
People start dropping. Yeah, we technically are to 11, but this is a lot of fun. So I had two questions from Claudine. And so let me just see, I didn't do my thing. This is what happens when I talk instead of actually doing the thing. Hold on just a second. Let me find Claudine. Claudine, you're allowed to talk. That's what it says on my screen. I think you need to unmute yourself though. Claudine, you there?
It looks like she's.
Hi.
Okay.
There she is. Great.
Sorry, my little one was crying, so I had to move around.
Don't worry.
So I have two questions, and Christie and Ajanet kind of covered a little bit of the questions I had. And my concern is conflict resolution is still pretty neo-colonialism and kind of imperialist in a lot of different ways. So do we need to redefine or at least rethink what Blackness is in a way that we are talking about not only Blackness for African American, but also Blackness for African in America? As a African Black woman in the US, my experience has been different than Christie. And Christie and I, we have conversation about that often. Yeah. Yet my experience has been the same as her too. So conceptions of Blackness, I think, has been different based on the background of the Black person. But the conversations we hear often are still representing one specific understanding of Blackness. So I wondered sometimes if we need to kind of rethink what Blackness is and what race theory is about, to not only include the Black experience, but also the mixed Black experience, the foreign Black experience, and how we understand this concept in the conversation here. So that's my first question. My second question is, based on the conversation I had with one of my students yesterday, for students who are entering the field and are trying to have the field reflect their experience of Blackness, how do they go about that, knowing that the field itself doesn't necessarily want to change, and a lot of the faculty are not necessarily wanting to expand their own understanding of race theory? So how do they go about that in a way that they won't receive backlash from the institution, but also from the faculties?
Well, because Claudine and I have had an ongoing and I think really robust conversation about Blackness, and that's something that growing up myself as a highly privileged second generation educated Black person who has had her own struggles with these ideas of Blackness, we've often had that conversation. I think there needs to be the constant and consistent realization that we are not a monolith. As people of color, from Afro-Latino to African immigrants to the United States, we are not a monolith. I can't pick up the phone and call Black people and have a conversation about anything, which sometimes it's like I joke about that. I'm going to get on the phone tree and say, hey, Black people, what do you think? But there also has to be, I think, some recognition that as a system, as a nation state system in the United States, there are certain racialized aspects that impact all of us who are of a certain phenotype in this nation, and all of us who have been identified, whether by our own identification or by other people's identification, as being Black. That there is a consistent treatment that goes on in this system called the United States, right? I think there has to be recognition of both. I think there is a coming together around Blackness, around that identification of Blackness, because of the system of white supremacy in which we find ourselves. But there also has to be the constant recognition that we are not a monolith, and that we all, what I say does not represent what all Black people say, et cetera, and that there needs to be that level of intricacy that is involved in our field. Quite frankly, I think that the intricacy of color really needs to be investigated within our field. In terms of speaking toward the student, I think finding those people who are going to be your champions are really important for that student. Reaching out to graduate students and faculty, regardless of whether in our department or outside the department, who's going to support what that student wants to research or investigate, because there's going to be pushback, but there's going to be support as well. And for the student to step into the breach, because if the student has these questions, then most likely they're questions that haven't been asked yet. That's one of the things I've certainly learned on my PhD journey, is that, the question is valid, and to sort of step into the breach and being willing to to do, whether it's their own independent research or research and supported by faculty, or whether in the school or outside of the school, or other graduate students or PhD students that might be of support, whether here at Mason or any place else in the country. I think finding those supports is critical for that student. So.
In terms of the kind of things that I would put into my own class, I am less concerned about assigning a scholarship that has been produced within the field of conflict analysis and resolution than I am about assigning things that speak to the topics that I think we need to be addressed. But when it comes to the point of creating the scholarship and taking that turn as researchers, and that can happen at the undergraduate level and is certainly happening at the graduate level, Claudine, I think your point of making space to talk about those nuances is really important, especially when it comes to theorizing and thinking about racialization. And but I just want to affirm that there is a lot of work already out there, maybe not in this field, but that is there for the taking, that addresses these things in a multitude of ways, and they're beautiful and they should be read and assigned.
You know, that's one place where I'm a little bit optimistic, Tehama. When I first arrived at the Carter School, which was then ICAR actually, there was a tendency, and I think you and I talked about this sometimes when you first were joining the faculty back in like fall of 14 or something like that, that there was a tendency to say, if it has not been said in a more narrowly defined field of conflict analysis and resolution, doesn't count. We can claim that it has not been studied. And it reminded me a lot of economists who tend to do a lot of that, right? Like economists haven't said it, hence it has not been said, right? And we've gotten better, I think, in admitting that these voices that maybe do not self-recognize as being a conflict scholar, and making sure we listen to those voices. We're a lot better about that than we used to. I think we still have a long way to go. But I think you're right, Tehama. I mean, when I'm going to be teaching 803 in the spring, and my guess is that maybe 2 or 3 of the books would be by scholars who self-recognize as being in conflict studies or peace studies, right? Most of the rest of the work will be from anthropologists and critical race scholars and political scientists and so on. And I think that's a really important thing to point out. We have we're sort of starting to run out of questions actually. I don't know if maybe some final thoughts from our panelists. We've got just a few minutes left. No, so y'all talked out.
I mean, we could probably talk about this forever, to be honest.
Probably.
I would like to, for me personally, I'd like to end my thoughts on a very personal note about the fact that, you know, particularly as people of color, we really need to have compassion for ourselves right now. This is a really, you know, the last couple of days have been so stressful, and I was really actually concerned about how I was going to do this conversation, how I was going to feel after the lack of indictment in the Breonna Taylor case, because there's something about that feels so deeply personal. And you know, we talk about, you know, we've talked about a lot about, you know, the imagination and hope, and I think, you know, just to have some compassion for each other and for ourselves in this space and in this time, you know, for everybody, this has been, I mean, 2020 can end today and I would be like, fantastic. It has been a hard year. I mean, it was a gut punch to lose Chadwick Boseman, and it was a gut punch to, I mean, it just feels like the rolling on between COVID and everything. And I hope that we just, even as we have these very intense and sometimes contentious conversations, you know, to just have some compassion for ourselves and for each other as we continue this path, because this is not, you know, a lot of people will think, oh, when this summer is over, these things will stop, you know, and the reality is that, you know, we've been having these conversations since before America was America, you know, and we've been fighting for humanization of others, you know, as long as we've been a nation. And so to have some compassion, to know that this is this is not a sprint, this is a marathon, and to have some compassion for ourselves and in each other as we continue to move, hopefully, the ball forward, that's key. And please, if you are eligible to vote and you have not registered, please register to vote. Please check out your eligibility. Please find out your polling place. Please have a plan to vote. Please vote like your life depends on it in November. And that's my last.
Yes, and if you are not eligible to vote, you can buddy up with a person and help them do that in a way that is going, standing with people in line, if they're going to stand in line, driving with them to the drop off, whatever it is. Because I was in line for 2 hours in Fairfax County this week, and there was an older woman who did not make it after an hour in line, and she was there with a buddy. And people need support right now, and there's ways to support, and just put it out there. Jurisdictions.
Yeah, are there places, I know, Ajanet, you're also putting in the chat, are there places where you can sign up to be support or be buddies? Is that by jurisdiction, or is there a place where we...
I honestly don't know, but there's a gazillion civic organizations that probably answer that.
Okay, awesome.
Good question.
Ajanet, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I just would say that I think sometimes we make large concepts like peace and human rights and conflict analysis and resolution like really big. And so I'm just thinking, what would a child say peace would look like, right? How can we narrow this down to think back to what a child would want peace to look like? And a couple years ago, I was in Liberia, and I was telling the kids that I was working with that I was there writing a paper, and one of them was like, "Oh, I wish we just had a library. I wish we just had enough food to eat. I wish we just didn't have to come outside and pump our water from a well here." So, I mean, what would a child ask for peace to look like? And let's work towards that, because their answers are really simple. I just want to have clothes to wear, right? I just don't want to live in war anymore. I just want to live. So that's my final thought.
Thanks, Ajanet. Thanks to all of our attendees for coming, for being online for about 2 hours, and surviving a few technological snafus along the way. And then special thanks to Christie Jones, Tehama, Lopez, Bunyasi, and Ajanet Rountree for offering their perspective based on their lives and their studies and their activism.
Thank you to you for organizing
Sure,
this.
yeah, sure. And thanks, a reminder to everyone,
so
there's
much.
more Peace Week events later today. They won't be as cool as this one, but there'll be other really fantastic Peace Week events for the rest of the day, so make sure to participate in those. Thanks to everyone for being here, and let's let's continue to work together. Bye everyone, and have a good end of your week. Take care.
Thank you all.